Hello and welcome to the Herdline Podcast, hosted by Trace Johnson and the Herds Headset. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode where the Headset and Trace talk all things Marshall athletics. Be sure to follow us on X and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Now, sit back, relax, and let's talk the herd.
Welcome back to the Herdline Podcast. Trace and the Herds Headset with you as always. We are ready for our second episode featuring of our new series where we feature former Marshall head football coaches, or could be basketballs, whatever as well. But we're just looking at football primarily right now. We started last week with the Doc Holliday era of Marshall football. This week we are moving on to the era that followed Doc Holliday, the Charles Huff era. And boy, it's going to be a very lively, very I don't even know what to describe this conversation. It's going to be good, put that way. Man, as well as that, we're also going to be looking at some of the results and some of the things over the past week for Marshall athletics. A lot more to talk about than even we thought we were going to talk about a couple of days ago. We've got some new things to talk about and things. So it's going to be a really good episode. We'll see how the conversation progresses and see how you all enjoy it. And, of course, we would love to hear your all's takes on a lot of this stuff as well. If you want to comment on any of our posts or message us or whatever, we'd love to hear that as well. But before we get into anything, how's it going, man?
Going good. And like you said, this episode's going to be a fun one. If there's ever been a more controversial coach in Marshall history, I really don't know who they are. Well, I guess you could arguably say a couple basketball coaches. We'll get talk about them at some point, but still, football-wise, there is none more controversial than Charles Huff. So I'm looking forward about talking his legacy and really all that he was able to do here. And then, of course, we've got a couple things about the spring game, and then the ladies softball team right now is nationally ranked at number 25 in the country. So, I mean, just a great time to be a Marshall fan. Lots going on. It's going to be a great episode. Looking forward to it.
Going to be a great episode, and you got a lot, like you said right there, a lot right off the cuff that we're going to be talking about. And, man, it's going to be exciting. And the spring sports are really, really performing very well overall for the herd. You got to love to see that. And like you said, spring football. I think we'll just start with that because that's a good lead in right there, because unfortunately I was not there because I was out of town that weekend or that Saturday, but you were there at the spring football game. You got a lot of takeaways from that game, and I'm going to totally defer to you on this topic because I wasn't there. And, you sent me some stuff and some guys that stood out to you and everything. Looked like it was a nice day for weather there. I know it was nice where I was. It's just Lexington, but it was nice both places. Looked like the crowd turned out pretty well. So just kind of talk a little bit about what you saw during the spring game. I know it's not very conclusive. Spring games really never are, but you can usually spot some guys that you think could be big-time playmakers. That's what I usually look for, is just certain individual performances. And I know you sent a few to me. So what do you think about that spring game?
Yeah, so I mean, and every time there's football on or around it, and it's being Marshall, then that's definitely got my ears perked up. I want to know everything there is about it. And I was able to go and experience the spring game live in person. And so a lot of different things kind of stood out to me. Number one, like you said, it's a beautiful day. It just couldn't really ask for anything better. A little warm even. And I was wearing long sleeve shirt, and I was like, oh gosh, it's getting a little too hot out here. But overall, there was some fun stuff that I think that was able to be kind of displayed for Herd Nation throughout the day. First and foremost, we didn't get to see the big names other than just a very brief stint of Carlos Del Rio Wilson. I believe that he played for about 2 drives, and then they took him out, which I completely understand. Don't want to get nobody hurt along those lines. But all of those big names that we all know and well, guys like Barbie, guys like Cannon Lewis, guys like Jalen Slappy, they didn't play. Toby Payne, they were on the sidelines. They were dressed in just their jersey, no shoulder pads, and their pants for the fan day, but they did not play in the actual game. And I would imagine, there's no need for them to play in the spring game. They've already solidified that they are a starter, that they are one of them household names for us Herd fans. And so this really was an opportunity for some unproven guys to get a little bit of time and showcase their talents and different things like that. And so I have definitely got a couple of thoughts on some guys. So, of course, first big question that I think a lot of Herd fans had going into this next season is what are we doing with the kicking game? Because, I mean, we were very spoiled last year. Lorson Quinn was one of the best kickers in the nation, and then Totten was a fantastic punter on top of that. So, you lose both of those guys via the transfer portal, and so there's obviously a big opportunity for somebody else to kind of step in and do their job. With that said, Tony Gibson has done a fantastic job once more this offseason in being able to pick up some very high quality level guys. The main guy that stood out to me was Cooper Heimbach. I'm telling you, this kid is fantastic. He is from Ohio. I do believe he was a 5-star prospect out of high school. And so he is now with the Thunder and Herd. And I got there early. As soon as the gates opened, I was in. And so I saw all the warm-ups and different things. And so something that stood out to me, the only ones that were on the field whenever I got into the stadium were the kickers and punters. And Cooper was literally just booming 60-yard kicks and warm-ups like it was nothing. I mean, it was honestly impressive. I mean, it was very reminiscent to kind of what Totten did, but maybe even a better leg overall. So that's really encouraging. That's awesome. During the spring game itself, he did more of the same. It was either 50 to 60-yard kicks for the majority of the time. And I think there was one kick in particular that did not get off the right way, but like he's a freshman, so what do you expect? You can't have everything be completely perfect and in sync, and it's the spring game too. So I mean, there's going to be mistakes, but overall, I will say this: from what I was able to gather and see, we definitely have a punter. That is no doubt and no question whatsoever. Now, the kicker is a little bit of a different story. Of course, like we said, Lorson Quinn was one of the greatest kickers in Marshall history, really, in my opinion, just because look where he's at now. He's at Alabama. I mean, it's either that or go to the NFL. I mean, that's really of a close level. So Jorge Diaz-Nicolas is from Spain. He is with the team. He's a redshirt freshman right now. And I will say this, he, like Quinn, has a very strong leg. I was watching him in warm-ups too. He was hitting them from about 40 yards out pretty easily. It had some room to spare there. During the spring game, he did end up missing a pretty difficult shot from about 30 to 40 yards. Not the most difficult kick, but not the easiest one either. And so he's definitely got a strong leg. At this time, he does remind me a lot of Lorson Quinn. If you can remember back to the beginning of this season, Lorson had a fantastic leg. I mean, he could hit it from anywhere. It was just a matter of could he be accurate enough to be able to hit it. And so, yeah, so that's kind of where we're at with Nicholas right now. I'm hopeful. I think that he will get things kind of squared away. It's just more practice. Of course, he'd never played football before from being in Spain. He's a soccer player by trade, and he's here just to kind of get introduced to a brand new sport. So you can't get too mad at him right now. I think with more reps, he'll be good. Then I also wanted to talk about the offensive line. So right now, and I'm just going to compare and contrast with what I was able to see last year at this time, the offensive line is head and shoulders above where they were. The majority of the day, everybody on the offense, all quarterbacks had time to throw, with maybe the exception of 2, maybe 3 plays overall. There really wasn't a ton of pressure that the quarterback had. Now, we'll talk about defense in a little bit. That could be, saying something about the defense. I don't know yet. We'll find out whenever we actually get some real games. But from what I could tell, they did very well in pass protection. They also did decently well with run game blocking too. There were some pretty good holes that they were able to open up. Not always. It was kind of hit and miss, but definitely better pass protection than the run game. Somebody that stood out to me on the offensive line, and I'm not sure if he will start this season. He was run with the 2s, I do believe, the majority of the day. But number 77 is Isaac Clary. He is a 6'7" offensive tackle. And I'm telling you, I was watching him. He was pulling. They pulled him all the way from right tackle to the left-hand side. He's quick. The dude is gigantic, and he made some good blocks. And so I really like to watch him overall. A huge talking point that I think that really all of us can talk about as the season progresses forward is just how good of a quarterback room that we have right now.
Yeah.
If you think back to the last episode that we had, we talked about the Doc Holliday era and different things, and we spoke on the subject of whenever Chase Litton went down with that concussion and then not really having a good backup. Garrett Moreau came in, he just wasn't ready. So, that was a very weak point. That was one of the weakest quarterback rooms I think that we had seen in Marshall history. But to compare and contrast, I mean, we definitely have a strong quarterback room from top to bottom. There's three guys really that would start a lot of places that are all in our room. Carlos Del Rio Wilson is obviously the starter. This is his team. You could tell whenever he was out there on the field, he had a poise about him. He was calm, cool, and collected. He made the easy throws. He's very comfortable in this offensive scheme now, it seems. And you can just kind of tell that the offense lives and dies by his performance. So, that was very encouraging to see. He did a great job in the spring game last year. I can remember leaving out of that saying, man, he should be the starter. But he looks even more improved, I think, this year than last year. Just with the easy throws he was able to make. He made them. Sometimes you can get a little finicky and miss those easy things, but he made every throw he was supposed to make. He was smart. He tucked and ran less than usual, which is something that we need to really watch as the season progresses. He ran way too much last year, and he's a good runner, and I'm for him running. But that also it cost him his health at the back end of the season, so he's
Yeah.
definitely got to be careful with that. Then Zion was running with the twos for the majority of the day. He had a solid showing, had one interception there towards the end of the game, but I don't really believe that was his fault. There was a batted ball. He threw the ball, and just one of them big defensive linemen got their hands up and batted and in the air, and it was on a tip that the interception occurred. He had a touchdown pass, and so he had a very solid showing. Not great, but also not terrible. And then the one that I think everybody was the most intrigued to watch was Khalil Wilkins. Again, that's the West Virginia transfer, played a number of games last year for the Mountaineers. And I will say this about him. He is right now a redshirt sophomore. So, again, if he sticks it through this season, he will have 2 more years at minimum of eligibility with Marshall. And if he decides to stay, I believe this with all my heart that he will be the future of this team. He is fast. Now, whenever I say fast in the quarterback position, I'm not talking about Cam Fancher fast. Cam was quick, but he was nowhere close to as fast as Khalil Wilkins.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Khalil was more shifty. He was way faster with that second burst. And I mean, he's really one of the fastest quarterbacks I think that I've ever seen wearing a Marshall uniform. On top of that, too, they let him throw the ball more than anybody else on the team. He had a couple of really deep throws. Of course, at the end of the game, for those that were there, he completed what I would probably say was around a 40 to 50 yard pass that just missed being a touchdown, got knocked down at the 1 yard line. So he kind of demonstrated a little bit his arm. He missed a couple of throws. That's kind of the biggest critique that he had at WVU is he was an excellent runner, but not necessarily a great passer. But I do think that if you give him a year of just kind of sitting and playing periodically, I mean, he'll get some reps this year because of just how fast he is. He's too big of a weapon to keep on the sideline. But I think with some reps, with some just kind of pressure-free scenarios, he'll be primed and ready for the 2027 football season to make a huge difference. I mean, I'm telling you, I think that he could really be somebody special if we can find a way to keep him, as we did with Carlos, for 2 more seasons as being a starter. So, that's a great thing. Great news from the quarterback room. Right now, we have a special group of guys, and that's really exciting stuff. Running backs. Again, Joshawn Barbie did not play, so I would imagine he'll probably end up being your starter this season, the running back 1. However, the running back 2 position is wide open, and there's a fight. There's a knockdown, drag-out fight for who's going to be able to take that spot. Judah Price, he had a fantastic game. And for those that don't know him, have never seen him play before, he is a small guy. He kind of is built like a tank. I mean, he's small, but he is wide. And he runs hard, and I liked what I saw out of him, but I really liked what I saw out of TJ Lester. He was a very hard runner and lots of yards after contact yesterday. Had a touchdown as well. So I mean, he had a fantastic showing. But over all of the guys on the offensive side of the ball, there was one that stood out to me the most, and that is Zay Turner Bradshaw, son of the great Ahmad Bradshaw. I really do believe this. He could end up being your breakout offensive player of the entire season. They had him at the slot position, and he had 77 yards receiving yards in just a matter of 2 drives, I believe. I mean, he just went to work and went to work quickly. He has grown. He's bigger than he was last season as far as just weight and things like that is concerned. And honestly, he's arguably the fastest guy on the entire field. I liked also what they were able to do, not just keeping him there at the slot, but they mixed him kind of like a utility guy at running back too. They had him in the backfield at some points and motioned him in and different stuff. I really like that, and I hope that we see more of that throughout the season because just looking at him, he's a good slot receiver, but in all reality, in my opinion, I think he'd be a better running back. And I might be wrong, and they may try it. He may fail miserably at it, but no matter what, you got to get him the ball this season. He's a playmaker. He's somebody that I think is going to be able to make a lot of noise this season because you can tell there's a difference in his game from last season to this season. And he had a good season last year, got in a lot of games, made some plays, and scored a few touchdowns. But I think he'll be one of those key guys this year with really a receiving core that has grown exponentially too. Another guy I really like is Owen Sweeney, the transfer from VMI. He stands at 6'3", and he just gives you some tremendous height there on the edge. So I really liked what I saw out of him as well. And here's one more thing about the spring game from what I saw that I just wanted to share. Of course, everybody going into the season's probably thinking this one thing more than anything. What's the defense look like? Because last year we scored points, and that really wasn't a big deal. We were always kind of in games because the offense was good. But are we good enough to stop the other team? That's the question. Well, for those who hate the 3-3-5, I've got some good news for you. Marshall lined up in a 4-man front pretty much all night, all day. So you can tell right off the bat, Brad Lambert is in town. He has made some changes. Tony Gibson has been humble enough to allow him to make those changes, which I think is just a tremendous move that will just pay off in dividends. But defense looked good. I said the pass protection wasn't great. There wasn't a ton of pass rush, but they did stop the run game pretty well. And the way that the spring game went, for those that did not, attend, the defense scored points by stops and also by turnovers. And so I think the final score of the game was like maybe 28-22. So that says something about your defense. I mean, they scored 22 points. They had some stops, had some good plays. They were very solid. The plays on the edge and the corners, I'm telling you, it's night and day difference. They covered their guys pretty much for the majority of the part of the entire game. Some big hits as well. I mean, like some Sports Center top 10 type stuff made the crowd go, oh goodness, right? So overall, Marshall looked really good on Saturday, a lot better now than they were last season. And I think that if you're a Marshall fan, that you have a lot to be excited about because, again, we had a good team last year. Again, you take 5 plays out of that entire season, and we could have ended up winning 9 games. That's really the difference in the wins and losses. I mean, losing by just a couple of points here and there. Nobody blew them out. They were in about every game that they were playing. It's just a couple things didn't go their way. Some of it was coaching and just bad decisions. Some of it was just busted coverages, mistakes. This year, I think that you're going to see a lot of that cleaned up, tightened up. And overall, I think we're going to be able to put out a very, very well-rounded football team from top to bottom. So that's my analysis on the spring game. I firmly believe, I think we talked about this before, 8 or 9 wins is definitely in the equation for this year of 2026. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that is very, very optimistic, very encouraging to hear a lot of that stuff. Just seeing a 4-man front defensively is going to be a sight for sore eyes, that's for sure. And I love that point. That's a big. I mean, it's just, you can say whatever, but that is a sacrifice for Gibson to be doing that, because he's ran a 3.35 everywhere he's been for so long, so many years. And, he saw it 1 year here. It didn't do very well. So he brings in a very accomplished, very experienced defensive coordinator that's been here before and has done great work here before. And he's just letting him do what he wants to do with his defense. And I think that, I'm sure they obviously they both have say. He's the head coach. Of course, he's going to have say. But he's really letting Lambert do his thing, it seems like. And that's very encouraging. He's not, it's not an ego thing. It's not a I have to be right thing. He wants what's best for Marshall. And I think you're seeing that. Great weapons offensively, no doubt about it. A lot of those guys came in through the portal. I was excited about a lot of the returning guys I'm excited about. So I think this is at least an 8-win team right now. If I had to say, I'd say they're at least an 8-4 team right now. Could be more than that even. We'll see. I'd be pretty surprised if they had an off year. We'll see. But I'm very excited about this fall and what they can do for sure. So moving on to a couple news things, updates here just over the last few days. This one's just as obvious as it can get, and it's the easiest decision that's ever been made by the Marshall Athletic Department. Julie Falks extended through the 2030-2031 basketball season. That is just obvious. Should have happened should have happened that day they won the women's NIT. It was one of those situations, but obviously there's a lot more goes into it than that. But congratulations to Julie Falks getting that extension, well deserved. I'm glad that they locked her in for the next 5 years. That's awesome. Very exciting to see where she can take this women's basketball program. She's already taken it this far, and it's in year 2. So by the time she gets through year 6 or 7 or whatever it is, I think you're going to see a lot of big things come out of that program. So just had to make note of that, because obviously it's the easiest decision you can make. Like, it had to be done. So great to see that for sure. So the men's soccer team, again, the spring league champs for the second straight year, the third time in the last 5 years. They shut out Ohio State 2-0. That's 4 shutout wins in the spring league. They're off and running, man. They're off and running. Chris Grassie's he's gonna Chris Grassie. That's just what's gonna happen. They're gonna be good. They're gonna be a nationally relevant, national contender. They're going to be a conference contender. That's just what they are. So very exciting to see that start for them. You got to love that, especially beating Ohio State in anything. Now you got to love that. But regardless how important it was to them or not, that's a big deal for Marshall to win that, going to get some really good programs. So congratulations to the men's soccer team there as well. Great accomplishment. I also wanted to talk about something that I really did not expect to write down. And I'm going to preface this by saying I'm going to absolutely butcher the name of this award. Going to butcher it so bad. But I'm going to go ahead and try it anyways. The Sun Belt Conference Vic Bubba's Cup. Do you have any clue what I'm talking about?
I think it's Bubba.
Bubba's. Okay. Because I was like, I've never seen this in my life. It looks like a foreign language, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it because it's actually a nice feather in Marshall's cap for sure. So this is basically all sports championship awarded to the top athletic department in the Sun Belt based on a point system. So it's looking at like fall and winter sports, like your overall athletic department, how well you do. So first place was Arkansas State. Second place was James Madison. Third place, Marshall and Coastal Carolina tied for third. I think that's very good for the Marshall because I haven't looked at some of those past standings and that, and quite frankly, I never knew it existed until now. But that's very, very encouraging as well to see. We've talked about it on here that our overall athletic department is doing well, and we're very competitive in a lot of sports. And the fact that we're up there tied for third in the Sun Belt in winter sports overall cumulative achievement basically thing, that's impressive to me. I think that shows where we're heading in the right direction for sure. I really enjoyed seeing that because you don't always think about certain other sports and how well they do, but Marshall's in a pretty good position. So I figure I better mention that because I think that's a nice thing, and we got a lot to look forward to there for the athletic department moving forward. Then we're going to talk about, before we move on to the Huff segment, we have to talk about bat and ball, softball and baseball. Because boy, there's a lot to be said between these two programs right now. Looking at softball, you said it to start. I think you said it to start the episode. They are officially ranked number 25 in the country. Love to see that. It's been a long time coming. They've been a great season. They've had a tremendous season so far. They are 32-10 overall, 13-2 in the Sun Belt. They have won 9 straight games. Just over the last week of games that we previewed, well, we didn't really preview it. We mentioned it last week. They beat Pitt 8-0. They ruled Pitt, which was pretty cool. And then 3 games against Coastal Carolina on the road, 6-3 win, 5-4 comeback win, and then 15-7 win. So softball program is absolutely on fire right now. I love to see that. Everybody loves to see that. It's phenomenal. They're right in position to be a Sun Belt champion this year, go on very far postseason wise. I think very, very good team that can hit the ball out of the park like nobody's business. So love seeing that. Baseball, we had a very up and down kind of week for sure, but ultimately did get back on the winning track as far as Sun Belt series goes. So that was nice. Although we got to start with the first game. The 12-2 loss in Morgantown was rough. That was not a good performance there. WVU's very good, but yeah, you would have liked to have seen more than 12-2 there. Then we go 3 games against Old Dominion at home, 8-1 win in game 1, played really well there. Unfortunately, a 4-1 loss in game 2. Didn't quite get the bats going in that one. And then in game 3, a 7-5 win, which I got to watch a lot of that game, and they played pretty well in that one. Just kind of made less mistakes than Old Dominion, quite frankly, in that game. And that the Herd currently sitting at 16-18 overall and 8-7 in the Sun Belt. Big week this week coming up for them as well, as tomorrow evening at the time of this recording, April 15th, they are playing at Ohio State, Greg Beal's old stopping ground there. So that should be interesting. And then we got 3 games at South Alabama, April 17th through 19th. Like to see them get, of course, another series win or a sweep or whatever. That would be great. But we'll see what they do. But before we move on to the Huff portion of the episode, we got anything to add with any of these things we've been talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, Old Dominion this weekend, like we talked about, was an incredibly important series for the Herd if they wanted to be able to be in position to be able to go to the Sun Belt tournament this year. So, I wish they would have been able to sweep them. Old Dominion is not a very good baseball team, but winning the series is, again, just what matters most. And so getting 2 out of 3 is a big deal. Like you said, at Ohio State, always whenever you go to Columbus, it's always a big deal no matter what. They've just got so much money and whatnot. And it's extra special for Greg Beals. That's the first time he's been back ever since his departure there a couple of seasons ago to come to Marshall. And so that would be really something awesome and something special if Marshall was able to go over there and end up beating the place that kind of let Greg Beals go. So we'll be hoping that they are able to get a solid win up there. And then, like you said, this is another very important series. It's a must-win series. In fact, I would dare say the rest of the series that they play, they need to make sure that they go 2-3 in the Sun Belt. They've gotten through the most difficult portion of the schedule. They played your Coastal Carolina and different things. And so, I mean, there's still tough teams in the Sun Belt, but if they really are trying to take a step forward and not regress or just stay the same, they've got to win the remaining series that they have on their schedule. They went through a little slump there, didn't get the bats rolling, and pitching wasn't that great. So, hopefully that Old Dominion series kind of woke them up, and they'll be getting back to their winning ways and, able to make some noise there at the end of the season during the conference tournament in Montgomery.
No doubt. They really need to get it going right now. I mean, you're in position, trying to make getting that top 10 or whatever it is of the Sun Belt to get to, the Sun Belt tournament, and like they're sitting there at somewhere around 7th, I think, something like that. So like they're not in a bad position necessarily in the conference, but you really do need to start racking up some wins, like consecutive wins in a row. That would be nice to see. But yeah, I also got to mention real quick that Bryce Blevins is the Sun Belt Pitcher of the Week. That was announced as well just today, I think, at the time of this recording. He had a great performance last week against Old Dominion. Got to love that out of your ace for sure. So great stuff there. Yeah, so hopefully now that they've got 2 out of 3 from Old Dominion, hopefully that gives them some momentum moving forward. So we'll see what they can do there. But with that being said, we are ready to move on to the second half of the episode, which will probably end up being longer than the first half, but we'll just see how it goes. We'll just see where the episode takes us. But we talked last week about the Doc Holliday era and how he departed or was let go, or however you want to word it, in early January of 2021. And within about 2 weeks or so after that, Marshall hired its next head coach in former Alabama running backs coach / associate head coach Charles Huff. January 17th, he was hired. Big splash hire. I mean, anytime you hire a Saban guy, any kind of Saban coach, it's going to make headlines. And, that was a big hire. I was very, very excited at that time because I thought that they needed to break out of the trend of hiring their buddies and all that kind of stuff. And I thought they needed to go in a different direction. And they did. I mean, you got to give them credit. Although there was a lot of drama there between Hamrick as the athletic director, Gilbert at the time as the president, and the board of governors. They did not agree on this hire at all. It's very well documented at this point. Hamrick wanted Brad Lambert, matter of fact, be the head coach. Didn't work out. Gilbert and the board of governors basically just overrode him, if you want to look at it like that. And that was really kind of the beginning of the end of Hamrick's regime, as the athletic director. And a few months later, he was out, his contract expired. So you kind of, at that point, the writing was on the wall that he was definitely not going to be coming back. But it was a very kind of dramatic entrance, for Huff at Marshall. And he had been all over at that point as an assistant coach. Like I said, he was at Alabama from 2019 to 2020. He had been at Penn State where he, coached and recruited Saquon Barkley. At Bama, he had coached and recruited Najee Harris. I mean, these are great, great running backs. He had been at Mississippi State. He had been at Vanderbilt. He had been 1 year for the Buffalo Bills. That should have been a dead giveaway that the man moves around a lot. We just didn't really put that together. But yeah, that he had been all over, well-traveled guy, and he had never been a head coach before. This was his first year, first chance of becoming a head coach. Matter of fact, Marshall's first ever African-American head coach, which was pretty cool, feather in his cap there. Pretty cool moment for the university. And, he came in with a lot of hype, and he did a lot of good things early on. He had made a lot of great decisions early on, bringing back Marshall guys, Ralph Street, bringing back other coaches, bringing back, alumni and former players to get them back involved with the program. That was really a very exciting start. He did a lot of good things heading into that 2021 season. But before we start looking at these seasons based on, year by year basis, what do you think about the hiring of Charles Huff, and how did it sit with you when he was hired?
All right. So thinking back to those days, I can remember, that there was a lot of movement for Brad Lambert to become the next coach. It's very, very interesting how all this works, and how kind of some things work full circle. And Brad Lambert's now back with the program. He had some experience there at Charlotte as their head coach, and really, in my opinion, got fired unjustly. I mean, he literally brought in the era of Charlotte football and was making some leeway. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I remember that whenever they made the decision to hire Huff, all that drama and whatnot happening within our leadership. It's very interesting because at the end of the day, with hindsight, nobody was right. Hamrick wasn't right. Gilbert wasn't right. The board of directors weren't right. There was nobody that really won that deal, because I think everybody was justified in their position, because the way that Huff left, Hamrick was right. We shouldn't have hired him. But the way that Huff left too, with winning a Sun Belt championship, we should have hired him. So It's really a unique tale of no one really being definitively correct about the situation. When Huff was hired, I saw all the places that he coached, and it was, to my understanding, I think he was 39, 38 years old whenever he came. It was, to my understanding, he wouldn't be here long. He had been an assistant his entire life. This was his first ever moment to be able to be a head coach. And like other, coaches that take a job like Marshall, I would have imagined, this is probably a 4 years and done type deal. You're climbing the corporate ladder, or if something does come up, then you're going to take it. And I was completely okay with that at the initial moment of the hire. And we're going to get into this, I'm sure, but the way that he went about things was not the right way. Because I look around the country and I see that there's guys that leave programs for bigger places. John Summerall kind of comes to my mind,
Yeah.
leaving Tulane, did a tremendous job there at Tulane. And the way that he left, I still believe that Tulane fans are, they think of him fondly. They don't think of him as a traitor. They don't think of him as somebody that just wanted to leave Tulane altogether and hated it there. They think of him as somebody that, hey, he helped our program get to the next level. And so, we appreciate what he did. We're thankful for the time that he, spent here. But whenever we talk about Charles Huff, you don't have that same narrative with the power of hindsight. Because he was here, he did all the things that he did, and I'm not going to spoil some of it. We'll talk about it. But by the end of his tenure, I think that the majority of Marshall fans were more relieved that he was gone than thankful for what he did. So, a very interesting tale this is going to be, kind of breaking it down, talking more in depth about his time at Marshall, and I'm looking forward to getting into the nitty gritty moments. Let's get into that.
Yeah, I mean, you could write a book about it. It could be a movie, it could be a book, it could be something, because man, it was something for sure. I mean, just like you said, just straight out of the gate, straight from the start, all that drama about whether they even wanted to hire the guy or not. I mean, it was just, it was just weird from the start. It was just a weird fit from the start. And we'll get way more into it. We're gonna touch on it all at some point in this episode. But like I said, heading into the 2021 season, his first season at the helm of the Herd, he did a lot of good things. He had a lot of things going. He had a solid team coming back that had just played for a conference championship the year before. He had a lot of good players back from that team. Had a running back emerge that year that ended up being very, very important player for the Herd. And he's playing in the NFL, Rasheen Ali. We'll get more into that later too. But looking at the 2021 season, didn't really know what we were going to have with him, quite frankly. Didn't really know what to expect from the Herd. I mean, I expected some good things that year because I knew Conference USA was so bad as overall. I mean, it was always kind of a top-heavy conference during those years, like with Doc, like we talked about. It was like maybe 2 or 3 teams that were contenders. Everybody else was kind of just mediocre or bad. And so I knew that we had a chance in year one. And 2021, they end up 7-6 overall, had a ton of close losses. And they started the year 2-3 with losses to East Carolina at home, 42-38, where we blew a 17-point fourth quarter lead at home. That was brutal. Really tough loss there. 31-30 loss at Appalachian State. We had a 9-point fourth quarter lead, lost. That was brutal. And then 34-28 loss at Middle Tennessee, where we never play well except this past year. We never play well in Middle Tennessee almost ever. And we had 6 turnovers in that game, lost by 6 points. I mean, there was no excuse that they lost any of those 3 games. They should have been 5-0 to start. Unfortunately, we just were not. Had some rough go of it there. Couldn't close out games. Couldn't have good performances in the fourth quarter. But after that, they did win 4 straight. They started turning it on there in conference, put themselves in position to compete for the East Division Championship after, they played Western Kentucky in week 12, and that was a winner wins the East scenario. And unfortunately, that was the game where Grant Wells got injured in the second quarter, and Marshall was up 14-0 on Western at that point with Bailey Zappi and all the talent they had. Herd was up 14-0. Grant Wells gets hurt. Whole game flips at that point. I mean, we'll never know if they were going to win that game if Wells was healthy or not, because you just never know, but we would have had a lot better chance. Western ends up winning that game 53-21. Just totally just blew us out after that. So we ended up losing 3 out of the last 4 games that year, as well as the bowl game, the New Orleans Bowl, to Louisiana, 36-21 loss. Louisiana, very, very good team that year. I think that was still when they had Billy Napier, I think, and they were really good that year. They were like a top 25 team, I think, at the end of it. Great team. And we played them really well. We just fell apart in the fourth quarter. Like that was the trend that year. We just fell apart in a lot of fourth quarters. The offense changed that year. Tim Cramsey was still kept as offensive coordinator, which I was surprised about. We ran a more up-tempo kind of air raid sort of offense. Grant Wells had big stats, but unfortunately what really hurt him the most is I think he might have led the country in interceptions, or at least he was up there high. He had 16 touchdowns and 13 picks. I mean, that's just not – you're not going to win a championship doing that. It's nothing against him. That's just wasn't going to happen. And overall, they had 4 losses by 7 points or fewer. So that was tough to see. They had a lot of close losses there. But overall, a pretty good start to the Huff era, pretty good first year. So we'll just, since they only have 4 years to talk about, go ahead and talk a little bit about that first season. What'd you think about it?
Yeah, I look at the first year of Charles Huff a little differently than what you do. Finishing 7-6 is not ideal. And I know that the first year coach, yada, 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 but I'm just trying to put it all into perspective. This team literally in 2020 was a Conference USA championship in the game, runner-up. I mean, they were, for lack of a better term, right there in the thick of it. And they added some key guys. I mean, they kept your starting quarterback, different things, and still in a horrid Conference USA had some really bad losses. Yeah. I kind of tried in every single season here. I put 2 categories. I have the good wins and I have the bad losses, and all the other stuff is just, yeah, you should win it. You're Marshall, you're better than them. It's really a no-brainer. Right. So of course the good win was Navy. Navy's always tough to play, but the way that Charles Huff came out of the gates, just dismantling them, it was fun. I mean, that got a lot of excitement going. Everybody thought, man, we are taking that next step now. Yeah. But like you said, losing to Middle Tennessee State at a game which you had no business losing. You just did not. With that many turnovers, it was just a horrendous loss. Yeah. Losing at home to East Carolina whenever you were, would you say 17-point lead, right?
Yep.
So,
yep.
I mean, that's just another horrendous loss. And I go back, there's just coaching decisions really on that one. I truly and firmly believe that watching that game. Another very tight loss was Appalachian State. This was before we became really big-time rivals in conference and stuff. But we were at App State. It was a very close game, but still just couldn't pull it out. Losing to UAB that season as well, another very bad loss. Marshall shouldn't lose to UAB. There may be a couple of outliers here or there, but that UAB team wasn't special. They didn't go on to do anything amazing, wonderful, or fantastic. No. Another just bad loss. And then the Western Kentucky game, Grant Wells going down doesn't help you, but still, losing to that degree. I mean, them putting up 50-something points on you, that's just terrible. I was there. I watched that game, and it was a tough watch overall. I don't put the final game of the season with the New Orleans Bowl losing to Louisiana as a bad loss. Louisiana was number 23 in the nation that season. Fantastic team overall. And but looking at that year one, I don't look at that as all right, we've got something to build on. It's more or less, well, last year with Doc, we made it to the conference championship, and we ran roughshod over the Conference USA for the most part. And now we're having trouble with Middle Tennessee State. What happened? What gives? And, I get people leave. Some of the guys that were on the team ended up transferring, all that stuff. But still, I just have a tough time at the initial moment of Huff coming in. And at the time, I was optimistic, as all of us were. First-year head coach, we're just trying to support. But now looking back and looking how everything went, it was just from the get-go. There was problems, and a lot of it was on the coaching side of things. The offense was frustrating with all the turnovers. The defense had holes, more holes than Swiss cheese. I mean, it's tough to watch as a fan. So that first year, again, we all left with a little optimism just because of our naiveness. I guess that's not even a word, but we all were expecting more, but we didn't get it. But it was okay just because it was Huff's first season. So looking back and just seeing it, it didn't do a whole lot for me. I guess you could say it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it was disappointing in a lot of ways because you're like we talked about last year, 2025 season. You were a few plays away from being a 9-10 win team. I mean, that was that team. They should have been 9-10 win team. I mean, they should. And that UAB loss, like you said, that was on 75 week. Right. I mean, that was not good.
And I think the big difference, though, like I don't look at last year's team in the same light just because the entire team was dismantled. You know,
Exactly.
we didn't have anybody come back. We
No,
had to go
no.
in the portal and find all the players except for about three or four. That wasn't the case when Huff came in. He retained a lot of very key players. When you keep your quarterback, whenever you bring a guy in like Rasheen Ali,
Yeah.
you should have more success. And so, again, that's just my issue with that first season. There should have been more, and a lot of it had to do with poor coaching decisions.
Oh yeah, and it's not apples to apples at all. I mean, you're talking replacing 74 players to replacing a few players. You know, that was before the transfer portal really took off. I think that was when you still could only do it one time and you had to sit out, which Lord, I hope they bring that back and I hope that works.
There's
But
talks that might
there's
happen.
there's a talk. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, no, it was they should have been a better team than that year. Rasheen Ali, I didn't even talk about the fact that he led the country in touchdowns that year as the rushing touchdowns or over. I don't even know what it was. He definitely led the country in touchdowns in some regard that year. He had an amazing year. And, you know, that's the thing is like, you know, Brendan Knox was gone from the year before. And you thought, well, what are we going to have at running back? Because I remember Sheldon Evans was still there. And people thought, you know, he's going to be running back one now. And Sheldon Evans was a good player. But seeing what Rasheen Ali did that year, you knew he was special. You knew there was big things coming from that dude. And, you know, that kind of leads us into the next season, 2022. You know, we're thinking, oh, man, Rasheen Ali, Heisman Trophy. Oh, you know, Rasheen Ali is going to be amazing this year. He doesn't even play until the very end of the year. He has a preseason injury, and he's out most of that year. And boy, did they strike lightning in a bottle with Kalen Laburn coming in as a former Florida State 5-star player that had went down to the JUCO ranks, I believe. And boy, he had 1 year at Marshall, and did he make that count or what? 1,500 plus yards. Amazing season. One of the best single seasons we've ever seen at running back for Marshall. Only 1 year, but man, they needed it. But looking at that season overall, outside of just Laburn, it was a good year. And there's no question about that it was a good year. They go 9-4. That was their first 9-win season since 2018. And that was their first year in the Sun Belt Conference. They had just moved from the Conference USA to the Sun Belt. That news came out in like October, I think, of 2021. Towards the latter half of that year, Huff's first year, the move was made that they were going to be changing over to the Sun Belt Conference because Conference USA was basically on life support at that point. Everybody was leaving, you know, so the Sun Belt just made the most sense in the world because of all the programs that are very similar to Marshall in terms of regional, you know, college towns, solid fan bases, successful football programs. They had a lot of that same stuff in the Sun Belt. And then year one, Marshall comes in and plays well in the Sun Belt. And before they even get to Sun Belt play, they had a 2-0 start, beat Norfolk State by about 100. It was a blowout, big blowout. And then arguably the biggest signature win, probably the best brand name team Marshall's ever beaten in football. Beats Notre Dame, number 8 in the country, 26-21 in South Bend. Arguably, I mean, I'm putting it as the second biggest win in school history behind Xavier. That's where I'm putting it. I know that varies from person to person, but that is a Mount Rushmore team of college football history. We go there and beat them. And I just remember that was one of the most ecstatic moments of my life as a Marshall fan by far. It was otherworldly how that felt beating Notre Dame like that because nobody thought we had a chance in that at all. So you're 2-0 and you're playing well. And at that point, you're number 26 in the country in the AP poll. And then you go on the road at Bowling Green and you think, oh, beat Bowling Green, we're going to be a ranked team. Didn't work. Ends up losing to Bowling Green, 34-31 in overtime. Terrible loss. It was awful. You had a golden opportunity to at least be ranked at that point. That would have been a nice thing to see. Didn't work. You know, it was just poor. It was just a poor performance. A matter of fact, if I remember correctly, they were up 14. Marshall was up 14-0. They had the ball inside the 5, going to punch it in again, and there was a fumble, and then they could have went up 21-0, and they fumbled it away, and then it turned the whole game. So stuff like that beats you. It just does. And at that point as well, I think they had lost their offensive line coach, had left at that point, like right before that game. So a lot of weird stuff going on there. Just strange. And then after that, we really went on a kind of the struggle bus. We only had one more win in the next 3 or so games. We beat Gardner-Webb, and then we lost to Troy. We lost to Louisiana at home, who wasn't very good that year, and we lost one other one, I think. But either way, we were 3-3 to start that year. 2 wins of those. It was weird. 3-3 start. 2 of those wins were over FCS teams, and then we beat Notre Dame. So it's like it didn't even make any sense. And then at that point, Henry Colombi, if you remember, came in very well thought about guy at the time, come in from Texas Tech at quarterback, and he was the one that beat Notre Dame. He's the one that was playing well. Then he goes down with an injury. Kind of, I don't know what exactly it was. I don't know. I don't even remember now. And they start Cam Fancher after that. And Fancher was a leftover Doc recruit. He had been with Doc his last year. And Fancher comes in and plays pretty well. He does a pretty good job. He really does. They ended up winning 6 out of their last 7 games that year. Beat UConn in the Myrtle Beach Bowl, which we both talked about being a great game to be at and watch and everything else. Really good win there. Beat them 28-14. Fancher goes 6-1 as a starter. You know, he wasn't necessarily flashy and setting the world on fire or anything, but he played well. Helped lead Marshall to a 9-win team that year. I mean, it was a good year. I mean, anytime you have a year where you win a bowl game and you beat Notre Dame, I mean, that's a good year. It wasn't a great year because, you know, they had a couple losses that were kind of rough, but a very good year. So talk about that 2022 season a little bit.
So some of the best memories I have as a Marshall fan came out of the 2022 season. Like you said, obviously beating Notre Dame is something that is just, I mean, it's otherworldly. I couldn't believe it. I wasn't able to go to the game, but I was watching it at my house. My dad I lived in North Carolina at the time. My dad came down. We watched it together. We were going crazy in my living room. It was unbelievable. Yeah. So, you know, that was fantastic. Kalen Laburn is my favorite running back in all of Marshall history. I know that he may not be the quote unquote best, but he definitely is my favorite. Just his story of redemption from having injury after injury and not being able to, you know, kind of come out and be the player that everyone was hoping that he would become, to come into Marshall and just completely turning it around, now playing professional football for the Canadian Football League now. Fantastic storyline. And with that being said, though, at the same time as it was one of the most memorable and most fun seasons, it was also the beginning of the end. And I say that, it gets tough to say that 9 wins. I mean, you know, but I would argue with you that losing to Bowling Green on the road is the worst loss in all of Marshall football history.
It's up there.
I don't know if you can top it. I mean, literally coming off of one of the greatest games of all time to playing Little Bowling Green. You're playing to be ranked. You're playing for, I mean, even maybe now we're talking college football playoffs. You know, if you're able to beat Notre Dame, you can beat anybody. But they just couldn't get it done. And obviously that was just a horrendous loss. And I truly believe that is the moment where we can look back and we can start to say people stopped having faith in Huff on that one. And it wasn't all at once. It was a slow burn. It wasn't just automatic. Everybody revolted and turned on him, but there was a small amount of the fan base that said, yep, this is not the guy. And from that point on, the more that you got into Huff's tenure, the more and more people began to agree with that sentiment. So that was a very tough loss. You talked about Henry Colombi, and I'll just say it this way. I think that he would have been an all-time great here at Marshall if he would not have had tricky Clint Trickett as his offensive coordinator. I mean, listen, I know that I'm sure he's a great guy and yada, 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 but even though he's came out and bashed Marshall before, so I'll just, you know, say it like it is. He was terrible.
No, he was not good at all.
He was not a good offensive coordinator, and we're going to see a lot of that coming in that very next season in 2023. I mean, we'll talk about it. You know, there's a stretch of football that he was kind of operating that was really some of the worst offensive football that I've ever seen in my entire life at any level. Pee-wee football was better at some, but anyway. So there was that situation. Colombi has come out and very publicly mentioned that he was incredibly frustrated because of the broken promises that Trickett and Huff both gave to him for coming to Marshall. They promised the air raid offense with Ali kind of being that supplemental guy, and then ended up being Labor, obviously. But it just wasn't that way at all. It was a run-heavy offense. They barely passed the ball. They didn't really entrust Columbia very much at all, which makes no sense because Columbia was a good quarterback at Texas Tech.
Yeah.
He wasn't like breaking records or anything, but he was a very solid guy, known to air it out, known to make some good throws, and they just did not give him those opportunities to air the ball out. On top of that, too, you talked about his injury and not even being able to remember what it was. That's another thing that just, drove me crazy as a fan. The overall lack of transparency that Huff had. Ali was hurt, and man, we were thinking every week he'd come back. He didn't come back to the last game of the season in bowl season. It wasn't even close to what our expectations or hopes were. And he just would not say yes or no one way or the other. And I get it. Teams have to game plan if Ali comes back. But, I guess it's not like Kalen Laburn was a slouch.
No.
He was just as good. He was right up there with Ali. So, to that argument of saying, well, we were just trying to make sure that we kept teams on their toes, I think that's bogus. I think that's completely false. That doesn't, you could tell people that, yes, he's probably going to be out for a good 9, 10, 11 weeks and just have that expectation. So that was very, very frustrating and something that would just that we would see the beginning here, but it would continue to build week in, week out we had no idea what was going on. And the craziest thing in all of this, Trace, is the fact that we were expected as fans to pay our money, go to the games, then donate to the Thunder Trust, and give all of ourselves for a program that didn't even tell us who's going to be on the field week in and week out.
Right.
You make that make sense. And let's be honest, some people will say they're just kids. They're not kids anymore. They're getting paid. We're business. In the NIL era now. We are a business, and so. If we're going to pay these guys and if we're going to be the ones that pay the checks for them and give them all these things, it is very, very reasonable for us as fans to know, yes, they'll be on the field. No, they will not. Or we're just not sure, but we'll let you know some point throughout the season, But we didn't even get that. So that's the most frustrating thing about that season. Great memories. I look back, fond memories of this year. But so much frustration began to build from that season.
No, 100%. Absolutely. And while you were going over saying all that, it just makes me more appreciative of where we are now as an athletic department because, we've talked about Christian Spears on here, a couple times and, where he was the athletic director when he was mainly the athletic director when Huff was there. And we'll talk about their dynamic later because they just never meshed. They never got along. It was ugly. I'm sure that behind the scenes was a nightmare. So we'll get into all that later. But yeah, it was a really good year on paper. The periphery. It was a good year. Like you're winning a bowl game and you're beating Notre Dame, a top 10 team. That we had not beaten a top 10 team since 2003 against Kansas State. That was the second highest ranked team we'd ever beaten. And Notre Dame is a lot more prestigious of a program than Kansas State is. So that was as far as just signature wins against a great program all time, that's our best, I think. It's not our best win. I don't think anything will ever top Xavier in 71. I don't think anything ever will, but that was top notch for sure. So with that being said, 2023, we going with big expectations that year. Big expectations. And I'm glad you mentioned Clint Trickett because I had forgot to mention that 2022, he came in as the offensive coordinator after Tim Cramsey left for Memphis after 2021. And 2023, you know what? We were fooled there for a while. 4-0 start. 21-17 over Albany at home, though. That was a game where we were in trouble in that game. And I was thinking, okay, that maybe this team isn't so great. Maybe this team is not very good. But then after that, 31-13 win over East Carolina on the road the next game, although we didn't play well in that game until the fourth quarter. We looked horrible for 3 quarters offensively, but really turned it on there in the fourth quarter. So that was a nice change of pace because we had so many struggles in the fourth quarter in previous Huff games, going back to 2021. So that was nice to see that. And then we get back home for a huge home game against Virginia Tech. We beat Virginia Tech 24-17. And that was a Virginia Tech team at that time that was struggling to find their identity. They had actually had Grant Wells. That's where he ended up transferring after the 2021 season. He went to Tech, and we were thinking, oh man, Grant Wells starting for Virginia Tech at home or at the Jones going to be amazing. Didn't quite work that way. Kyron Drones got to start there, and he ended up being a good quarterback for the Hokies. But this was like his first or second start, so it was very still rough water. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, this is the first start for Drones. We were 1 week away from having the perfect scenario of Grant Wells at home. That would have been awesome.
1 week away, but you know what? It worked out for the best because in front of a huge crowd, packed house at the Joan, 32,000 plus or whatever it was, Striped Stadium looked awesome. We beat Virginia Tech. Great moment right there. Absolutely great moment. And then the next week we beat Old Dominion 41-35. You know, we're 4-0, 1-0 in the Sun Belt. And then everything just went downhill after that. The next game we lose a very competitive, very good game to NC State on the road, 48-41. So even though you're 4-1, I'm thinking, you know, that's not a bad loss at all. Like, that's a good team and we're hanging with. But then after that, everything was just bad. It was just very rough. Ended up losing 6 out of the final 8 games that year, had lost 5 straight after a 4-0 start, and they went 2 straight weeks without an offensive touchdown in the middle of that run. And I don't know how many quarters that equates to, but, man, they were on the struggle bus. They scored 9 points against James Madison, who was really good at that point with Kurt Cignetti before he did what he did. 9 points against James Madison, a safety, and a special teams touchdown. 6 points against Coastal Carolina. I don't even remember how they got those, but they weren't offensive touchdowns, but a touchdown, put it that way. And then 9 points against Appalachian State. Now, granted, that they did score a touchdown in that game, but it was like not till the third or fourth quarter. So that's 3 weeks in a row where they scored 9, 6, and 9. Really rough. I mean, just brutal stuff. Cam Fancher was battling injuries a lot that year. He just did not progress the way we thought he would, but he did get hurt and missed quite a few games. Cole Pennington played a couple of games there. He ended up beating Georgia Southern on 75 week. And then Fancher comes back in week 12. They beat Arkansas State at home to clinch bowl eligibility, 6-6. But then ends up playing in the Frisco Bowl against UTSA, who was a very good American team at that point. Lost that game 35-17 after going up 14-0. Rasheen Ali had a huge long touchdown in that game. He played really well that year, 1,000-yard season. But we just looked rough. I mean, and then the real drama of that season started not even on the field. We're talking Fancher enters the portal. And we kind of knew that was probably going to happen at some point. So he enters the portal. Huff gets asked about it. Huff absolutely shreds into everybody and everything. He calls out the fans. He says, we don't have any NIL money, and Cam Fancher, that fans hate him. And he's basically saying that the fans are like causing his mental health to be poor, is basically what they're saying, what he was saying. And he ends up having to come out and apologize publicly for the comments. And somebody in his family goes on Facebook and says, that's a total lie. Like, he doesn't hate the fans, or the fans don't hate him. He has no ill will towards Marshall whatsoever. Huff's out here just basically spewing out garbage because he's mad and he can't handle the heat. And it was very ugly, very, very ugly. It kind of reminded me of 2016, although we weren't that bad. But as far as the state of where we were at that point, because of all that, it was ugly. So talk about that 2023 season, and this was really the beginning of the end.
Yeah, this is the most frustrating year of football that I've ever sat under. Just was. 2016 was bad football, but it wasn't nearly as frustrating. There wasn't as much drama. Yeah. And that's saying something. I mean, we've seen drama, but we've not seen it to this degree. Virginia Tech, fantastic memory. That's one of my top 5 favorite memories ever. You've seen that at home at the Joan. That's a huge deal. Great win against East Carolina as well. Like you said, but the rain delay that took place that game, they just came back out of the rain delay just ready to play, and East Carolina just didn't. I mean, it was just unbelievable. But bad losses, I mean, we can name a ton. They had that NC State game. I was there. I watched it, and it was a great atmosphere, fun time, sold out crowd. But I don't put that as a bad loss though, just because it's NC State. It's always going to be tough to play them. James Madison as a tough loss, real bad loss. Coastal Carolina, bad loss. App State, bad loss. South Alabama, bad loss. Yeah, and then losing to UTSA again. They were a good team, but You mentioned it, Ali. He had a touchdown in that game. Then Huff took him out. He didn't play
Mm-hmm.
the rest of the game. And so, as a fan, you're just sitting there like, are we just not trying to win anymore? I mean, what
Right.
in the world's happening? No wins in the month of October. And to your point, it was not just 2 weeks without scoring; it was 2.5, 10 quarters of
Wow.
scoreless offensive, football that we watched at Marshall. Winnable games. I mean, games that on paper we definitely should have won. We had a better team. We had a better roster. Couldn't get it done. Horrible coaching decisions and by Huff and coordinators. I remember Owen Porter, as much as we like to remember him fondly, he came out that season and talked about the fans and
Yeah, he did.
the lack of support overall. And that was something that never sat well with anybody. And then, like you said, having the Huff situation too. Then on top of all of that, behind the scenes, you had a lot of drama between Spears and also with Huff, and with Spears overspending literally in the millions and putting Marshall in debt that we're still trying to crawl out of right now, even. And I get it. He wanted to spend money. We had to have more money for the program to compete at a high level, but the way that he did that just did not mesh well with Brad Smith. And then Huff being frustrated with the fact, well, you're not giving us the money and that you said that you would give us because now we don't have it. And so you just had this very, very, very volatile, toxic environment, and even led into Huff and the way that he treated those in the athletic department. From my understanding, he'd come in and he would kind of be rude and say things that were a little bit off the wall, and so it was a very tough position that Marshall was in during this season, and really for the remainder of Huff's tenure. But I mean, stuff started to really blow up in 2023, and it was again just an incredibly frustrating year as a fan to watch it all unfold.
It was, and it kind of came out of nowhere because everybody thought, 7 wins, then 9 wins. Oh, we're going to be a Sun Belt contender this year. And they started out really well, and the wheels just kind of fell off. I mean, they did get a couple wins there to salvage bowl eligibility, but it just did not click at all that year. And, that was the year also Lance Guidry had been a defensive coordinator for the first 2 years. He did amazing work for the defense. 2022, that's one of the best defenses in program history by far. That defense was lethal that year. But then he ends up leaving to go to, I think it was Tulane, and then or somewhere.
Then to Miami.
Like
he went to Tulane, then Miami.
Yeah, right. So then he goes to Miami. Yeah, Tulane and Miami. And then we bring in Jason Seymour, who had been a Georgia Tech defensive. Well, he was an assistant there. And 2023 defense they weren't bad. They were put in a lot of bad situations, but they weren't very good either. So there was a lot that still needed to be worked out there. A lot of stuff had to be worked out. And then you go into 2024 and morale is very low. Let's just call it like it is. Morale is low at that point. After all the turmoil, all the drama that had been put out there and it had been said and done, 2024 was a big year. And a lot of people wanted Huff gone after 2023. A lot of people were thinking, no, we got to get this guy out of here. And that just isn't really feasible for a program like us, because you don't buy out coaches. You just really don't do that because you can't really afford to do that. And Huff had another year, at least 1 year on his contract. I don't remember what his initial deal was, probably 4 years. So 2024 comes, he comes in. He pretty much guts the team, the roster. He pretty much goes out and gets a bunch of new guys out of the portal. And to his credit, he hit on most of those guys. Absolutely hit on these guys. You've got 2 new quarterbacks into play. Stone Earl, North Texas transfer. Braylon Braxton, Tulsa transfer. That would create its own drama there, flip-flopping between those 2 guys. But Stone Earl starts the year. He was okay. He wasn't bad. He just was kind of a game manager at best. That was kind of what I would describe Stone Earl. He started out pretty decent. They have a 3-3 start to that year. They ended up losing to Virginia Tech on the road in a pretty competitive game. And then they lost to Ohio State, who was the eventual national champion. And they played really well for 2 quarters against Ohio State. They played them pretty well, and then it just went downhill because Ohio State's way better. But you obviously. But after that, you're sitting there at 3-2 because you just beat Appalachian State at home, where you start Braylon Braxton. He wins Sunbelt Player of the Week because of his performance, 5 touchdown plus or whatever he had against App State. So naturally, in week 6 at Georgia Southern, naturally the guy that didn't play and didn't just win Player of the Week is going to start the game. Stone Earl starts against Georgia Southern. They play this quarterback roulette of Earl, then Braxton, Earl, Braxton. They kept flip-flopping back and forth the entire game. We have a 20-point lead in that game at Georgia Southern, blew the lead, lost the game in the fourth quarter. I think it was like 23 to – I don't remember what the score was. It was 24-23, I think is what it was. Very, very tough loss there. At that point, I remember tweeting. It was out of anger, but I remember tweeting, Charles Huff should not be allowed to coach another game at Marshall. I was very, very upset after that game because it's like we had no business losing that game, and he basically tried to out-cute everybody else and like think that he was so much smarter than everybody by playing 2 guys. When you just stick with the hot hand, Braxton, who was playing really well, you just stick with him, you probably win that game, no question. So that was rough there, 3-3 start where they should have been, well, I mean, they would have lost to Tech and Ohio State, but you should have been 4-2 for sure. But then after that, he starts Braxton every other game after that. They win 7 straight games to end the year. Ends up winning the Sunbelt East Division. Played really well most of those games, had a dramatic win at James Madison in a double overtime game in week 12 to clinch the East Division. We go on the road at Louisiana in the Sun Belt Championship game, beat the brakes off of Louisiana. We end up knocking their quarterback out in the first or second quarter, and we just beat the brakes off them. 31-3. We beat Louisiana. First conference championship in 10 years, first Sun Belt championship ever. But all while this is going on, Huff's already out the door. His relationship with Spears is just beyond repairable at this point. He's already in the ears of all of our players and all of our coaches. Come to Southern Miss. That's where I'm going to go. And it was just a bad ending. Really, really rough ending. We were supposed to have played a top 25 Army team in the Independence Bowl. We had to back out of that. That cost us thousands of dollars because most of our players transferred, had already entered the portal, weren't going to play. We would not have had a healthy enough amount of players to have played that game. So that cost the university a lot of money. Very unfortunate. And then the day after the Sun Belt Championship game, it's officially announced that Huff's going to Southern Miss, which we knew that for weeks that was going to happen. And, he gets up there in a press conference and says, why not, talking about coming back to Marshall, why not 4 more years? Why not 5 more years? I don't know. Maybe because you're leaving. I mean, that's why. It's like, and we'll get way more into that season. There was a lot more stuff coming after that and before that, a lot of drama. But I mean, as far as on the field success, it was a great 10-3 record, Sun Belt championship. But we've talked about it. Even though we won the Sun Belt that year, it felt like our soul had just like left our body at that whole point. Like the program was like, it felt like scary bad. I remember those feelings not being very good at all. So talk about that 2024 season. That was his final season.
Yeah. That's the year that Marshall lost its soul. It really is. Winning 10 games is fantastic. And, that's something that we should always and forever be proud of. But as a fan that lived and watched all of the events that transpired during the Huff era, that Sun Belt championship didn't even feel very good. I mean, It felt fine. It was fun. It was good. And something that we can pound our chest and say, yeah, we're Sun Belt champs. But even the way that we won it, we went up against the backup quarterback initially and then hurt him. And so we beat the brakes off of the third string quarterback. And so, I mean, yes, we won it. And yes, that's impressive. But I would even dare say it's the least impressive conference championship that Marshall has ever won. So, losing to Georgia Southern, that was it. That's your death nail. A lot of people had already checked out no matter what. But that game is the nail in the coffin for Charles Huff. That was the point of no return. It was not going to get better from there. Now, the initial reason as to why Marshall was not going to sign him again had to do with a lot of different factors. Of course, there was drama, there was behind the scenes things, but to my understanding, the biggest reason of them all was, there was a handshake agreement, and that was probably a mistake on Spears' part because it
Yeah.
wasn't in writing anywhere, but it was a handshake agreement that Charles Huff would not be linked to any other coaching job for 1 year. And if he did that, then he would get an extension and he'd make millions of dollars. So that was the idea. That was the handshake agreement, yada, yada, yada. And it wasn't too long after that he was linked to Virginia Tech as they were about to look for another coach. And so, Marshall came back to the table, and this is something that I am internally going to be proud of. Brad Smith and all of the board of directors, they stood on business. They said, hey, you can win out and you can win the Sun Belt Conference and we can be in top 25. But because you refuse to be a man of your word, we are not going to resign you under any circumstances or conditions. That's
Right.
exactly what happened. I mean, Huff won 7 games in a row, won the Sun Belt, and did not get re-signed. And I'm incredibly proud of our current administration and leadership for that decision, because it's also my understanding. A lot of people don't know this, but Huff came back to the table once he realized that he was not going to get one of these high-end jobs
Mm-hmm.
that he was hoping to get, like where he's at now, a Memphis or these other jobs he was linked to. He was never going to get that. He was just in the conversation. He was probably the 5th or 6th option in all of them. But he came back to the table and said, hey, can we make a deal? Can we figure this out? To which Brad Smith and company said, you broke your word. We're not doing it.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for winning the games, but have a nice day. Good luck wherever you're going in the future. And so, that is something that I have always been incredibly proud of, and something that a lot of fans don't really understand or don't know about this whole saga is what went down behind the closed doors and the conversations whenever we talk about that. So, whenever we get to the end of that season, we won a Sun Belt Conference title. We should be on the highest of highs, getting ready to play Army, getting ready to, just have a fantastic ending to the season. And it just wasn't right. It didn't
Mm-mm.
feel good. It didn't
Mm-mm.
feel like this is Marshall football anymore. This was Charles Huff football. And you'd mentioned it a second ago. I mean, this is not allegedly. This is literally spoken fact from Braylon Braxton himself. The week of practice
No, yeah.
before the conference championship game, Huff had mentioned to Braylon and other guys on the team, and mind you, this was before that infamous press conference where he would end up saying, why not 4 more years? He
Mm-hmm.
told his players, I'm gone, I'm going to Southern Miss, and I want you to come with me. To which, all those guys that he'd mentioned that to got together and they had a conversation. What are we going to do? And a lot of them would end up following him over to Southern Miss. And so, again, that's illegal. That's tampering to like that. That's the highest level of tampering that I've ever known. You're
Yeah.
still with a team and you're recruiting them to go to another team, but no one will ever, crack the whip on that by any means. That is what it is. But the way that Huff left, the way that Huff left our program, it was just in complete disarray from top to bottom. Fan base had checked out. Football team's completely gone. The athletic department's in shambles.
Yeah.
You're basically now saying goodbye to an athletic director who tried to live up to promises that he could not keep with getting millions of dollars into Huff's recruiting program, and it was just awful. Although we won, it came at a very mighty cost, and it cost a lot of fans, honestly. And yeah, that's where we'll leave it for that year. But I mean, it was a tough time, even in spite of us winning 10 games. It was a tough time that the national media and other teams around the country, especially Southern Miss fans, will never understand
No.
because they did not live it the way that we did, and they didn't see the things that we saw and how far our program fell from the grace of what Marshall football was really all about.
Yeah. And it's funny because I go back to something that I said before we even got into any of this stuff, like right at the beginning of the Huff segment. I said, I thought whenever they moved on from Doc that they needed to just break out of the trend of hiring their buddies and hiring Marshall guys and hiring West Virginia guys. Well, they did, and it cost them big time. Not for those 4 years necessarily, because there were some ups and downs, but for the long term state of the program, it cost them. Because this is just the bottom line. If you're even WVU, if you're Marshall or if you're WVU or if you're anybody in this state, it's just different here. It just is. This state doesn't sell itself like so many other states do. We don't have that. Like, there's a chip on people's shoulders in this state, and you have to prove yourself to them. And if you're not a West Virginia guy, and especially if you're not a Marshall guy, you just don't get it. You don't truly get it. And you can be involved, and you can be the coach, and you can go and coach the team for 4 years. But if you truly do not buy in and you truly don't get it, the fans are going to know that. And fans knew that Charles Huff ultimately did not get it. He did a lot of good things here, but he did not get it. He just didn't. That's just as simple as that. Guys like Tony Gibson, he's a West Virginian. He got it. Doc Holliday, West Virginian. He got it. Bob Pruitt, alum. He got it. Brad Smith, alum. He gets it. That's it. I mean, that's just how it has to be. Mike Hamrick, as the athletic editor, he got it. He understood. So that is a big defining point, I think, of this whole saga. Is Huff just never really understood where he was and what job he had. And I'm not, what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think to define the it there, when you say got it, West Virginia people they know exactly when somebody's lying to you, and they know when somebody's telling you the truth.
Yeah.
They know when you care about a place, and they know when you could not give a crap about it and you just want to go somewhere else.
Yep.
And, Huff would get up on a press conference and say, hey, why not? Let's stay. Let's make this great, blah, blah, blah. And it was all just coach speech. It wasn't real. It wasn't true.
It wasn't real.
And like I said, I knew the kind of coach he was going to be. He was never meant, and he never intended on being here long. And no. I understand that. I completely get that. However, the way that he went about things of just completely disregarding the first place that ever gave him an opportunity to be a head coach and leaving it in utter dismay and way worse off than what he found it, that is really that tells me the character of Coach Charles Huff. Now, he might do things for players personally, and players love him. He's a player coach and all that stuff. But you show me what Marshall was the month after he left. That is the legacy that he leaves behind in Huntington, and that's how we will all remember him until the end of time.
Well, that's the fact, and you also got to think, and he's got no say over the transfer portal rules and all that. He's got no say over that. Players can do what they want to do, and at that point, there were still 2 portal windows, and now there's only 1. But if you actually gave a crap about where you were, you would not have gutted that team like you did it. Like I know that they can. It's one thing if they just leave on their own. It's one thing if they just make a decision and their agent says you can go make money somewhere else. But if you're avidly recruiting them and the coaches on your roster, on your staff during a championship week, I mean, that is pretty low. I mean, I'm just saying, and like I said earlier, the fact that he had so many assistant coaching stops pretty much just said the guy's a traveler. The guy's that's just what he's going to do. He's going to move around. And he always felt like a short-term head coach for Marshall. Always felt like it wasn't going to last very long. He had one foot out the door from day one. I think that goes without saying. He took interview after interview, talked to team after team for 4 years. That's Christian Spears said that in whatever radio interview he did a couple years back. So it's not anything that's not already known. And that's just at a place like Marshall, you just can't have that. Like, you just cannot have a guy that's that distracted. And and that distraction, you could see a lot of that distraction for those first 3 years as they lost games they shouldn't have lost. They were in situations they shouldn't have been in. There were things being said that should have never been said. You could see that distraction. And albeit in 2024, they turned it on, the second half of the year, there was all kinds of distraction going on at that point. And they just were able to overcome it because they had good players. But it was bad. It was really bad. All that drama that we talked about with Christian Spears and Brad Smith and all that, going up, not living up to his handshake agreement. I know it's just a handshake. I know it really doesn't mean that much, but if you're a man, like, that should mean something. Not going to get any deeper than that, but like you gave somebody your word, you should uphold that. Just don't talk to people. And that's the thing, is like, he could have ended up, if they would have just waited one more year. Okay. If they could have just made it work for one more year at Marshall, he could have came back with the entirety of that team, basically, besides maybe Mike Green or JJ Roberts. You could have came back, probably repeated as Sunbelt, had a chance to repeat as Sunbelt champions. Maybe not with James Madison being as good as they were. That could have been a really good team, and he would have been the exact same position that he's in now, because he goes to Southern Miss. He starts 7-2. They lose 4 straight games in the year. He leaves and goes to Memphis after 1 year. I mean, that could have all been avoided. But they were so against each other. He was so done with Marshall. Marshall was so done with him that's all he had to fall back on was Southern Miss, a 1-11 team. And, he did turn them around to be a pretty good team. But again, 4 straight losses, team's going to have to be rebuilt. He left you right after the first game. And Southern Miss fans, bless their hearts, the fact that they are truly fine with that just blows my mind. I mean, that I understand, like, that he wasn't going to be there for long. But to say, yeah, we're really happy with what he did in 1 year. What did he do? I mean, they ended up being a decent team at best. Like, is that what you're striving for? Decent at 1 year? I mean, I'm sorry, we have more expectations and we have higher standards here than you do, clearly. I mean, I'm just saying. So that was crazy to me. But
yes, and Southern Miss too. I mean, that's a good program historically.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can remember a long time ago, I'd made a social media post. If you weren't a fan of Marshall, what would you be a fan of? And I said Southern Miss because we've got a lot of similarities in our program and our fan base and all of those different things. And to see the way that they were just embracing him and loving the fact that, yeah, he's only here he's a mercenary. I saw that so much. He's our 1 year mercenary that's going to win us a conference championship, and then to win 7 games. That's your pounding your chest and saying, yeah, this is our guy. It doesn't make any sense to me. No. We're not trying to just win 7 games a season. At Marshall, we're playing for championships. We're striving for greatness. And so, but with that being said too, I think a very key thing for Marshall is we need to do it the right way. And that's Marshall football. We're not cutting the corners. We're not trying to let the fans down in the process. We're not trying to lose the soul of what makes this place special. We're going to do this, and we're going to do it the right way. That's the Marshall way. And that's where we're at now. Tony Gibson comes in, and, man, what a breath of fresh air. Mm-hmm. What a breath of fresh air. I mean, we went 5-7 last year. Of course, I wish that we would have won more games and different things, but there's more excitement in that 5-7 season than we had at all during the 10-win season of Charles Huff winning the championship. So, I think that we are definitely in a much better position right now for long-term success than we ever were whenever Huff was here.
Could not agree more. It's just going to be a wonderful day whenever we break through with Tony Gibson and win a championship. It's going to be zenful because I remember how it was with Doc, when we finally broke through in 2014 and won the Conference USA championship on top of the world. It was amazing. It was, that you knew in your heart that this was a guy that really, truly cared about where he was, really, truly put everything he had as a coach, as a person, as an everything into Marshall University. And even up through Doc's last days, and we talked about it last episode, we had some rough points and games and losses. He cared so much about Marshall. I mean, he just did. And unfortunately, that just was not the same with Charles Huff. It just wasn't. And nothing to do now except we're going to move on and we're going to be just fine. Marshall football is going to be just fine. But before we totally wrap everything up, I wanted to talk about a few points here, just a kind of overall broad look of the Huff era. So in 4 years, he has a 32-20 overall record, 62%, which is about what Doc's percentage was. Granted, a lot more years for Doc, but it was about the same percent, 61, 62%. 20-12 in conference play. Now, one of those years was in the Conference USA, and then 3 more were in the Sun Belt, but still 62% conference winning percentage. He won 1 Sun Belt East Division title, and then they won 1 Sun Belt title overall, as we mentioned. 1 and 2 in bowl games. Had a great win in the Myrtle Beach Bowl. We loved being at that game, and it was fun. Had some guys drafted, really good players drafted. 2022 had Nazi Johnson drafted in the 7th round. That was the Doc holdover as well. 2024, but he did develop well under Charles Huff. Got to give him that. And then 2024, we had 2 guys drafted: Rasheen Ali in the 5th round and Micah Abraham in the 6th round. Again, those are Doc recruits, but they developed and turned into really, really great players under Charles Huff. And then 2025, Mike Green, 2nd round pick, going to Baltimore. He was one of the best defensive players we've ever seen come through Huntington. We had the Sun Belt Player of the Year in 2024 in Mike Green, not just Defensive Player of the Year, the overall Sun Belt Player of the Year in Mike Green. We had the Sun Belt Newcomer of the Year in 2024 with Braylon Braxton. He did really well for us, went on to Southern Miss with Huff and did fairly well there, really. But Mike Green, even though he was only at Marshall for 2 years, he's a Marshall guy. He is a Marshall guy through and through. That's one of the last, JJ Roberts, another one of those guys that, despite all the toxicness that was going on around them, they're Marshall guys. Owen Porter, same thing, Marshall guy. Those guys are few and far between now, quite frankly, at any school. But those are definitely our guys for sure from Marshall. They live, breathe Marshall football. That once it's in your blood, it's in your blood for life. And I think that those guys are right there. So, got to wrap it up with giving an overall grade of the Charles Huff era. I have not even thought of this until now. So, you go ahead and lead off with what you think.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I didn't write anything down. Talking it through, there was more. So not just on the field success, but when I look at the Huff years, there was more bad than there was good. It just was. So, I'm thankful for the Sun Belt Conference Championship. I'm thankful for the win at Virginia Tech here. I'm thankful for the win at Notre Dame. But the remainder, I'm also thankful for a couple of wins against really good James Madison teams. But the remainder of this tenure was just, it was not very good. It just wasn't. He lost a lot of games that he should have won. There was so much drama. It was unbelievable. And so with that being said, I can't give him anything higher than a C- in my personal opinion. He was below average. Although he did a lot of good things, 9-win season, 10-win season, still a C- is all that I can give him.
Yeah, here's where I am with that. If you just want to look at on-field results, if you just take away everything else, all the drama, all the BS, if you just look at on-field results, I'm kind of in the B+ range. But if you take off the field out of it, that's an F. I mean, that is an F, maybe even an F-. So overall, if you balance it all out, C. It was a C era, C run, not necessarily in results, but there are things that are far more important than results. And he dropped the ball mightily in those things. And I think that objectively anybody would say that if they actually know this. And now it's funny because a lot of people were like, I can't believe Marshall doesn't want to keep a guy that just won a championship. I can't believe. Really? You have no earthly idea what you're talking about. Like, I don't know how many people I had to say that to on social media. I'm like, dude, you don't understand. You have no clue what you're saying right now. And one thing recently, I saw one of Huff's first Memphis things, pressers or whatever it was, he said that the other 2 programs that he had taken over were broken programs. This is the first not broken program. I'm like, homeboy, who's broken here exactly? Marshall
Yeah.
was a top 15 ranked team in the country at one point in 2020, and they played for a freaking championship before you got there. How are that broken?
And I had a clip that I put together and put on social media of Huff
I
at his
remember.
introductory to the players saying, "This is not a broken program.
Exactly.
You guys played for a championship last year, and if
Yeah.
you want to win that championship, stay with this team." So
Yeah.
it just boggles the mind, man. He lies so much, and
Hypocrisy.
I wish him well. Hopefully he does good at Memphis. Hopefully they like him here. But I tell you what, if he were in Huntington, I don't think I'd buy him Jim Spaghetti anytime soon.
No, not at all. The line's long enough to get in there. We couldn't wait that out anyways. But no, I don't know. And I hate that, like, well, I don't really hate it, but I hate that it kind of is sounding like sour grapes for this whole episode. But like, we're being honest. We're being very, very blunt and very, very honest, because if somebody, okay, here's the deal. So we're diehards. Okay. It doesn't take much to see that. We bleed green, just like so many other people do. And if somebody does something to hurt our school or our football program or anything to do with Marshall, they're not going to be remembered very well. And we're going to keep it real and honest. We talked about it. West Virginians can sniff out BS from a mile away. And the man just said so much stuff, so much just hypocritical, two-faced, just bold-faced lies. And it's like, that's just not cool at all. And it's like, and his like little farewell tweet that he did, it was like probably AI generated. I mean, he barely said anything about anything. I mean, it's just unfortunate, because we could have really, if he had actually had any, no offense, any integrity whatsoever, we could have been in a really good position, because he could recruit and he could bring in he brought in talent. We saw what he could do. I mean, he had some good players. He had a lot of good players. It's just the program was not going to succeed with a guy that constantly had one foot out the door, constantly wanted to try to advance his career. And I don't try to blame. I'm not going to like blame somebody for trying to advance their career, but like the way that he was doing it and the way that it was interfering with his work and like everybody involved with the whole program, the way that it just kind of like, set the program backwards, just rubs everybody the wrong way. And you have to have a little bit of, honesty and a little bit of integrity when you're doing that kind of job. Like, you have a big voice, like you're the head football coach. You have a voice that really resonates with people. So it was just unfortunate the way it went down, but I'm glad we have Tony Gibson now. I'm glad that he is restoring the culture of Marshall football. I'm glad we have a lot of guys that are returning that don't always enter the portal and just totally gut the team from top to bottom. I'm glad we have that now. So very much looking forward to 2026 Marshall football. So with that being said, unless you got anything else to add, that pretty much does it for this episode. You got anything else to add?
I'm good. Go Herd.
All right. We will be back next week, and we'll have to get into some more episodes starting next week with some different coaches. Probably going to stick with football. Probably going to touch on the Mark Snyder era next. I feel like that's a good place to go, because despite the fact we didn't have much success, that's another guy that got it, because he's a Marshall alum. He understood where he was. He knew what the job was. And we're going to get way more into that. And then hopefully we have a great week of on-field, on-court, well, not court, but on-field results. And we can talk about that next week and see where we go. But with that being said, go Herd, and we will see y'all later.